Hello there, welcome to part 9 of the Medewi campaign. In the previous part, we fought a pretty difficult battle to take a settlement from Saba, but were victorious in the end. Lakamezi started an army to come and support Arakamani, but then he was wounded by an assassination attempt, so Arakamani's son brought the forces over instead, and they then had to run through some attrition due to lack of supplies to get back to the battlefront with the Saba. Interestingly, on the way, Pergamon declared war on Saba. Pretty much irrelevant, but just thought I'd point it out as a weird thing to have happened. Here's Pergamon, very far away. Are they even aware that Saba exists? It's not clear. Perhaps they joined it to impress me? Not totally sure. So eventually we do actually get to the front line here at Haga. Is the first battle. This is Kashta, Arakamani's son, leading our army. Apparently it has no chance against the defenders. The enemy fleet's here, and that's boosting their balance bar presence quite a bit. We'll just sit there and build siege equipment. At the same time, Arakamani and our fleet are going to be attacking Mascad. Our fleet's already there, blockading the port and running out of supplies, so we need to take this place right now to resupply the fleet. Luckily, no problems there, since the Saba force has just abandoned this place. It only has its garrison, and the garrison has no chance against our army. We say goodbye to them, and we will capture the settlement. This completes the province of Arabia Felix, so this was my war objective, to take Arabia Felix. So that last place, not so interested in, but we're going to attack it anyway and perhaps just create a liberated faction just to finish Saba off. We don't want them coming to retake their territory. Arakamani's army not in the best condition, but we're going to send it over to help if we can, getting rid of our mercenaries since they were super expensive and are now half dead. Now we get this very remarkable offer from Rhodos. They come to us and say if we give them a very small amount of money, they will be our satrape. This is essentially a vassal ship. They'll be our puppet state. They'll be forced to join all of our wars and fight for us, but in exchange, if anyone declares war on them, we act like an ally. We have the option to betray them, but we're meant to come in and help them in their wars. The other thing that benefits them from becoming our satrape is it ends any wars they're already in, because you take on the foreign policy of your master faction. So perhaps that's what they're thinking here. They want to get out of the war they've apparently started with the Seleucid Empire. So I forced them to pay for the privilege just because I could, and the deal went through. We've gained ourselves a satrape. Perhaps we'll get them to help us out in something or other later on. Now I moved my fleet over to support the siege of Hagar, and as it arrived I saw an interesting looking balance bar. I thought the enemy were being disproportionately represented here because I had my army and my fleet coming in and they only had a garrison. I thought my army could beat the garrison on its own, so with the fleet I thought surely this is a guaranteed victory, but maybe not. I wanted to test it by actually fighting it because it would be interesting to do a port assault, but I made a terrible mistake. I led the attack with the fleet. I thought that since it still says you have siege equipment on the battle initiation when you lead with the fleet, that our siege weapons would still be here and our land army could still use them to get inside the town. In fact, you get nothing, they all disappear, and your army comes on as reinforcements. So that was disastrous, and had to reload the quick save, come back here and restart the battle by clicking on our army to lead the attack. This time the balance bar was what I thought it would be though. We just have a gigantic advantage. That's what I expected, considering the fact our fleet on top of our army is easily enough to crush this force even with their walls. We have so many siege weapons we get in pretty easily. We're going to do the quick version of this and just auto-resolve it and liberate it right away. So that'll just end Saba's territory, and we're creating a new minor faction for ourselves. We can just have them defend our border or something here. We definitely don't want to expand up in that direction much because the Seleucid Empire is right there and they're in that province as well, and we don't really want to be challenging them right now. So as for our fleet, I could have gone and taken out the Saba fleet which was sitting nearby, but you can see it's taking attrition. It's because it has no home port, so it just kills the crew for whatever reason. So now I'm just going to skip past it. We're going to take Arakamani back to Mascat, put him on our fleet and try and sail him back to Ethiopia and see if that's any faster than walking. At least it will avoid some attrition. The problem is the Saba fleet then just runs straight past me and comes to attack Mascat. I don't know why I didn't expect them to do this. I was just so confident they wouldn't bother because the AI often doesn't take really obvious moves, that when a really obvious move's available, I don't bother defending against it, and this time, we've actually been bitten by that. They have a big advantage apparently, although I didn't necessarily believe the balance spot here, so I was quite eager to give this one a go myself. For the first part of the battle, we just had to watch the whales and allow the enemy fleet to come in and land, staying quite well back from the landing point so that the enemy didn't just sit there in their ships and throw things at us while we stood there. So they do come in to land, and they're going to be landing in a couple of different groups. This main group coming in on the spit's quite nice because it's going to be choke pointed. They've got one ship coming over to the western part of the town just on its own, and 3 more coming into the eastern part of the town where I landed my own fleet, and I'm going to set up near the beach there to resist them since they're just archers. Also, I thought, as we'll see. Now my melee troops rushed forward because the enemy landed some archers as their leading units here on the spit, and we encountered a problem. Not only were these archers actually the archers that turn into spearmen, but comparing the stats, they're actually better in melee than my spearmen, so that's a disastrous combination. I was hoping for a quick victory against those archers, and then I'd run back and allow these guys to land so I could bring my own ranged units to fight against them. Instead, some of them are just sitting there in their ships throwing javelins at us. That's going to thin us out a little bit, and other units are going to be landing, so soon they'll have plenty of support, and we are not taking those archers down in the way that I envisioned it going. So, bad news all round. The flashing thing in the corner of the screen insists that we look over here where our commander's under attack. This is because I moved too close to the edge of the beach where they were landing those archers, and it causes them to stay in their ships and just shoot you. So I had to move back to try and convince these archers to come in and land. They're having some trouble landing because my own ships are there as well. It was a bit of a kerfuffle. Now the big thing I thought would turn this battle is this unit of tribesmen. We've got a couple of units like these, and my plan was to move them up towards these melees to just throw javelins into them and take out the enemy. None of them have particularly high armor, so I imagined this would be quite effective. The problem is it just didn't really work for whatever reason. Maybe it was pathfinding, maybe the unit's very weak, but they just didn't really throw that much at the enemy. We've got the same problem here. I've got 2 units of our tribesmen fighting with this unit, which claimed to be archers earlier. I think it might actually have been skirmishers, but it's actually a melee unit that just skirmishes on the side. Anyway, it's skirmishing with our skirmishers, and it's winning, so that's a bad sign. We're barely killing them at all with our return fire, and they've killed a number of our troops, even though we have double the amount of men throwing at them. So, again, all going a lot worse than I expected. Here's another one of those units, and I felt I was being a tiny bit conned here because when they were out on the ships, their flag had a ranged icon, but when they land, it turns into a melee icon, and now I'm facing a melee charge in an area where I had only left ranged units to defend, except these tribespeople, and they're not especially useful, but I'm going to have to use them. They're the only thing I have. So while they come in to attack my archers, the tribespeople will rear attack the enemy's melee units, and that's going to do approximately nothing. As you can see, our troops here, if you can call them troops, have virtually no equipment, no weapons, and no armor, so it just doesn't do anything. They're just there. They'll still inflict a morale shock, but that's not going to be enough. Meanwhile, the guys who went out to stop the enemy's archers storming the landing point have just been surrounded and destroyed because the enemy could land everything else. Big trouble, and the rain of javelins and arrows that is theoretically falling down upon these enemies is very light, and it's not really doing anything. I've got all these ranged units here. I think I had 2 or 3 javelin units and 3 archer units firing into this blob, but it's just not doing anything. We did get double figures kills there, I think, but I expected to be wiping entire units out. Similarly problematic things happening out here outside the town, where that one unit has overcome our skirmishers and the Jav Cav I sent to try and thin them out, and they're now just menacing all of them. So you can see the theme here is that all of our units have not done as well as I predicted, suffice to say. The enemy easily capturing the eastern approach now as they just wipe out our tribespeople, and after they destroyed our melee units resisting their main attack group, They were able to charge through and hit all of these skirmishers who were trying to run away. I've still got a bit of ammo, so I could keep skirmishing away, but now they're coming into the town from other directions, and these tiny groups are going to be very problematic indeed, since we don't have anything to bring them down with. And eventually it came down to just our naval crew, which were archers. They were sniping over some ruins into the enemy's archers and managed to do a tiny bit of damage, mainly because these archers weren't paying attention to us and were just shooting our tribespeople, so they're good as meat shields in that regard. But as you can see, we lost the battle in the end. Two big surprises here, really. The first one being that they bothered to attack us at all, and that our troops were just annihilated far quicker than I expected, and we actually barely killed any of the enemy. We defeated one ship crew in total and thinned out some of the other ones, but not enough to get rid of them, and we lost pretty much everything, and you can see that on the tooltips. I was inspecting what damage each unit did and noting it was virtually nothing in most cases to lose whole units. Very disappointing indeed. So the result of all this is that Saba will take Muscat back and their faction will live on. They even hire a new general right away. We're going to have to keep fighting them. It looks though like the ally we liberated is fighting them for us already. They attack a nearby army and the animation's messed up there, but I think they did fight. Province contested? Yes indeed. We are going to have to go and take Muscat back. Luckily we're close enough to it so we can just start walking back over there right away. And the Saba main force nearby appears to have hired tons of mercenaries to make up for the losses it just took in battle against our ally, but it's not going to be quite enough, so we can thank our ally and the large losses they appear to have taken for weakening Saba, because it means that Arakamani can now just stomp their army right out of the bat. So this renewed war with Saba isn't going to be too difficult. We're going to be on the offensive the entire time now. We can just start walking towards Muscat, and they're probably not going to be able to put a force together to stop us, principally because the population in this region isn't very high anyway, and they've already sent so many armies to their deaths that at this point it's probably difficult for them to hire new troops, especially because we've actually done a pretty decent job of convincing the people they're at least somewhat Egyptian, which will be reducing the pool available for our enemies. Our fleet's going to blockade the ports at Muscat, and we even have a chance to just take it right now by attacking. Although there's no particular point, we can just wait for Arakamani to arrive as I did, and now we'll just fight everything at once. Super advantage on the balance bar, we'll just take that and stomp everything out of existence. I was a tiny bit hesitant because our baggage train is near death, and we've seen before Arakamani loves to throw the baggage train into combat, and once again it does take losses for some reason. Luckily it survives, so we will carry on. Saba are now completely destroyed, so there's no risk of them pulling any more antics. We have done it. With that achieved, our war in Arabia is over. It's not really sensible to take any more territory in this area, so Arakamani is going to start working on going back. As I mentioned earlier, I plan to put him in the fleet and send him back to Ethiopia to see what we can do in the future. So on the subject of future plans, let's start looking around. The most important thing to note is that the Roman Empire appears to have conquered its way down to our border, the Roman Republic specifically, but the Empire of the Republic. So we may now have to worry about those guys. Let's take a look at the diplomacy for them. They don't really like us, and I was quite eager to make that not be the case, because if we can get on the Roman side, and we're already on the side of the Seleucid Empire, those are the two big players in the known world, so that should keep us pretty safe from any major invasions or major wars. The problem we're going to face is that the Romans just won't take anything. Huge amounts of money weren't enough to convince them to go into even the most basic diplomatic agreements. Now it turns out I've completed a mission of some kind. I tend to ignore those missions because the things they tell you to do are just things you'll do anyway, since you have to do them in order to progress the game. So I just ignore them and treat this as free money once in a while, so that is all well and good. My spy here is going to have to make a long journey west so he can start spying on the Romans. I want to know where their armies are, because if they're about to attack us or they're going to consider it, we need to know well in advance so we can prepare something, especially because most of our army is very far from the potential battlefront. In fact, it's having some trouble because I was trying to sail it back, but they're taking attrition here in the fleet, and it's actually because I lost the supply ship at some point. I think the supply ship in the fleet must have died during one of the auto-resolves where the fleet was involved, and I didn't notice, but that's not such a big deal because the speed at which the ships were travelling was so low that they were actually going to run out of supplies anyway, so I went back to the old method of just walking. I think it is actually a bit faster and a lot safer to walk, although we will actually take attrition walking thanks to the low supplies in this region. Basically, it's going to be really hard for Arakamani to get back without just disbanding his army, which I don't want to do because it's really high level. Now, I came back to Rome, and I'm so desperate to make Rome be on my side, I thought I'll just give them some money. This is something that the mod authors recommend you try in the diplomacy, because diplomacy is harder. You can just buy favour from other factions, and it does seem to work. They go from unfriendly to neutral with us as a result of that gift. But it didn't really achieve anything because they still weren't willing to consider deals with us, even if I also threw in even more money to make it go down easy. So they just don't want anything that could possibly benefit us to happen. And that's a bad sign. You can see I got so desperate, I started offering anything. I was saying I'll declare war on all of their many enemies, give them money, if you just promise you won't attack us. And they still wouldn't agree to that. So if they really won't make that promise, that's suspicious. We will have to keep an eye on those pesky Romans. And hopefully they'll be distracted by their current wars. Carthage still exists over in the west, so they'll probably be focused on that for a decent amount of time anyway. I started recruiting a new army near Memphis with Lachemeses finally back in action after being wounded, and the initial objective for this army was possibly to betray our allies once again and try and unify Libya so we have everything together. While preparing that, we learned some very inconvenient news. The Romans have gone through the Marian reforms. This makes all of their troops better overall. It transitions from the Hastati, Principe style armies to legionary style armies, the style of army that conquered pretty much the whole world at the time. So now they're going to have access to that military system. They're probably going to start expanding even more. Now, another highly interesting offer from another faction. This time is Taxashila. This is an Indian Hindu empire which is conquering its way up into Western Asia, and they're at war with loads of people right now, so maybe that's why they're offering to be my satrapy all of a sudden, because that will take them out of all their wars. So I'll just take their deal, thank you very much. This is a pretty big deal for us, because Taxashila isn't just some one region faction like Rhodos. They are a gigantic empire, and now their foreign policy is linked to ours, so anyone who declares war on us also declares war on them. And in fact, I think if I declare war on people, they will also be forced to join us. I was just taking a look around, and you can see they've got a lot of territory. They probably have almost as many regions as we do, so a massive faction to suddenly become our satrapy. They clearly didn't want to be at war with the Seleucids and all of the Seleucid satrapies. That's probably why they're at war with so many people, since the Seleucids just call in billions of factions to their wars. And unfortunately, they weren't willing to trade with us. This really appears to be a marriage of convenience. They don't like us, and we can't enter diplomatic ties. They just want to be our satrapy for some reason, probably on a technicality. And now it looks like they may not be getting out of the war with the Seleucids, because the Seleucids just declared war on Rhodos, the other satrapy who we got. So it seems that tying ourselves to other factions, while it makes us very defensible because these factions will help us, there is an obligation back the other way. Now, the obvious answer here is to just break our relationship with Rhodos and nothing would happen. That would be fine. But since we are filming this campaign, I decided to take the less intelligent option and join the war where, according to that balance bar, we have no chance whatsoever, just to get things going. So we'll see what happens now. We're at war with the Seleucids and all of their satrapies, including the Parthian Empire, I believe. So this could be a problem. They're starting with an attack at Salamis, but it's an attack that actually will be fine in, apparently. I didn't want to fight this battle because our garrison army is facing a fleet, and we've just seen our garrison army attempt to fight fleets. And that was an Arabian-style fleet. This is a Hellenic-style fleet, which has more professionalized units with better equipment. So I was like, well, if the auto-resolve says I'll win, I'll take that, because I don't think I actually will. So that was a good start, and in the next part we'll get into how the rest of this big war is going to go.